Hello and welcome to another session on project management. We'll be talking about project monitoring and control. And if you will have any questions during this session, feel free to ask. So what is project monitoring? It's sort of a measurement of success and measurement of project state. There are two stages of this measurement. It's called project monitoring and project control. And they're targeted to measure project progress against project baseline and quality of the achievements against project quality standards, as well as ensuring that time allocated for the execution isn't exceeded. So project duration is within the baseline measurement. The project monitoring and control is done pretty much throughout the project once the planning is completed. And the monitoring and control is done until the very end, the closure stage of the project. So activities of the monitoring and control, they're done throughout the whole project. So how do you monitor and control the project? Essentially, it's a matter of reviewing the progress, communicating the information regarding this progress, and ensuring that appropriate steps are taken where necessary by engaging the stakeholders and project team members. More specifically, the project during its life cycle requires regular reviews, regular measurement against previously prepared project goals, or so-called project baseline. And this is done on a regular cadence, regardless of project type, so that you can have a solid understanding of project health. To report the project progress, you need to know what are the goals of the project and to be able to accurately measure progress towards these goals. Once you can measure it, you can communicate the appropriate information, you can communicate to the appropriate stakeholders and project team members. And communication really depends on the type of information you're sharing regarding progress and types of stakeholder groups. So it can be both, for instance, it can be an interactive communication done in a meeting, live or virtual, where you require feedback from the team members or the stakeholders. It can be a sort of a newsletter, basically a push style communication, or it can be more of a querying type of communication where you send the feedback and you send the progress report and you require feedback on this progress report to align measurement of the progress. So that's where you want to make sure that stakeholders are engaged. And for instance, you have progress report that includes insufficient progress or deviation from the goal, and you might need to engage stakeholders or project team members to issue corrective measures. And project manager is the key person to identifying when this is beyond, let's say, beyond area of expertise for the project manager. It has to be, for instance, escalated to the project sponsor or senior executives, stakeholders within the project. So going back to this baseline and measurement, it's necessary to identify early on how to measure project success, and for that you need to track specific parameters of the project towards the goals. And usually it's the costs, the progress of the goal achievement, and the quality of deliverables and whatever outputs of the project. So, any questions so far?
No, for now, no questions.
Okay. So there is a specific performance domain within PMBOK, Project Management Body of Knowledge, and that's called Project Work Performance Domain, and it's closely tied towards measuring success of the project, measuring the execution of the activities within the project. And the performance domain is specific to project work that addresses activities and functions associated with establishing project processes, managing resources, and defining a learning environment, basically collecting information along every step of the project execution. So project work as a part of performance domain is focused on ensuring that all the project activities are running smoothly. So as I have on the slide, it's managing the flow of the existing work, identifying new work, and handling the changes to work. Keeping the focus of the project team, and basically making sure that work is done towards the goals. Establishing efficient systems and processes within the project, handling the communication with the stakeholders, managing resources such as materials, equipment, supplies, logistics, if relevant. If there are contractors on the project, working with contractors and vendors as part of resource management and procurement. Monitoring the changes that affect or can affect the project, and handling project learning and knowledge transfer. So one of the major steps of the project work performance domain is working with the project processes. The project manager and team, they both work to establish and review on a periodic basis the processes that the project team uses to conduct the work. This includes all the communication plans or the project plans, the performance data of the project. So all of this should be done on a regular basis from a review perspective to identify where there is a process bottleneck. If something is slowing the project down or having impact on achieving the planned goals or measurement against the baseline, and basically ensuring that work is flowing at the expected rate. One of the key techniques, as I described in one of the previous sessions, is so-called process tailoring. That's part of a project tailoring. And this is done to optimize the processes for the needs of the project. And this can be done anytime during the project life cycle, essentially when it's deemed necessary. Since project is changing entity, you might need to change the processes that you use for the project. And naturally, the more complex the project is, the more relevant it is to regularly review project processes and tailor them if necessary. There are several methods how to optimize the processes. One is called lean production methods, and that's essentially, as I mentioned, around lean methodology. It's technique that maps value stream to measure the ratio of value-added activities and non-value-added activities, and to eliminate anything unnecessary in the flow. Another way of optimizing the processes for the project environment is using so-called retrospectives, or more commonly known as lessons learned. And the lessons learned is basically information collected from project experience, and often archival data from previous experiences that are relevant to the project at hand, and help identify certain facts around project execution, such as, let's say, in a course of project execution, you identify that you should not work with vendor A just because vendor A doesn't follow certain procedures. And that's a lesson learned for future projects, or even for the current project, not to engage this particular vendor, as an example. And the third method of optimizing the processes within the project is identifying the best funding spent. And this question helps determining if resources funding applied to the current task is reasonable, or it's better to move the resources to another activity, another task, to optimize the value delivery, the delivery towards the project goals. So this is again part of regular review of the things happening within the project. Next part of the project work performance domain is balancing competing constraints. And essentially, it's any project, since it's a change stretched over time, you should always find a balance in dynamic environment. And leading a project requires understanding the constraints that you have on your project and work that you do. An example of constraints can be fixed delivery dates, regulation compliance, budget limitation, quality policies. Essentially, all of these can be present on a project, and even more of these constraints can be present, and necessity to meet project goals and to comply with these constraints is basically the fine balance that the project manager executes. Moreover, these constraints can shift and change throughout the project. Therefore, regular review of constraints is needed. For instance, budget can be reduced for the project, or delivery dates can be forcefully changed for the project. let's say, to earlier date. So this work requires activity of collecting and validating constraints with the stakeholders. So balancing these shifting constraints while maintaining stakeholder satisfaction is an ongoing project activity. It's something that you do constantly. It might be done through meetings with the customer, with project sponsor, with the product owner, to present alternatives and applications of certain changes to the constraint within the project. Sometimes decisions and variances can be within the authority of the project team and project manager in particular, if this is explicitly stated within the project, so that certain changes can be done without explicitly consulting with the customer, sponsor, or the product owner. But this still should be done in a balanced manner to ensure that changes to the project remain within planned baseline of the project. Next is maintaining project team focus, and it's a very hard thing to do at times, since team members might not have the full picture, or they might not be paying attention to the full picture of the project. So project manager is the main character to ensure focus of the activities within the project are targeted towards the goals of the project. Leading the project team includes balancing the workload and regularly assessing if project team members are satisfied with the work. So it's part of a motivation within the project team. And since we're all working with people, it's critical to ensure that team motivation is at the desired level. And this impacts business and stakeholder value delivered throughout the project while the project team is motivated and working towards common goal. So it's another element of balance within the project. Project communication and engagement. This part of project work performance domain is what I talked about, basically ensuring timely communication of work being done within the project to ensure that changes planned are within acceptable areas and conform to the stakeholder and project team expectations. So information for the communication and engagement of the stakeholders and project team is collected constantly during the project lifecycle, and it's collected in meetings, conversations, retrieval of information from the documents and other electronic repositories. And this information is collected and distributed as indicated in the communications plan for the project as defined by the project manager. It can be regular pre-scheduled cadence for this information collection, but requests for the information, reports, presentations can come ad hoc. So having information at hand to satisfy these ad hoc requests is very useful. So it can be an unexpected request for a report from the executive management, and the project manager should be ready to respond to this. And also high volume of ad hoc requests for the information can indicate that communication plan is insufficient and might need review to improve regularly shared information towards the stakeholders. So it's a good idea to think beforehand to reduce these ad hoc requests to satisfy desire for the information from project stakeholders. Physical resources management can be relevant to the projects that you do, but not necessary. Not all projects require physical resources. And essentially, projects can rely on third parties, and ensuring that everything is properly planned, ordered, stored, and transported with the resources being tracked and controlled. It's a huge amount of work. It requires essentially a logistics system. And this is part of, in most cases, a part of company policies in terms of acquiring these physical resources. So objectives from perspective of physical resource management are to reduce or eliminate material handling and storage on site of such resources, eliminate wait times for the materials, minimize waste, and facilitate safe work. And this is more relevant to non-IT environments, let's say, even though sometimes IT is engaged with physical resources such as infrastructure components like servers and whatnot, what's related. But in most cases, it's other types of project management, not IT. And work with these physical resources must be integrated with project schedule to ensure that all the expectations and communications are done in a timely manner for all the stakeholders. Related to physical resources, but not just physical resources, any type of resources, it's procurements. And not all of the projects, but many projects do involve some sort of contracts or procurement to get materials, equipment, supplies, labor, services for the project delivery. And in most organizations, it's not the job for the project manager. Project managers don't handle the third-party contracts for the resources. Usually it's special people who deal with this because it involves complying with regulations, with the local and international laws, and ensuring the contracts are properly handled. Quite often it's done through customers, the stakeholder customer for the project. I will not go into further details here. It might be more interesting topic if necessary, but for now I'll just stop at that. And now a big part of the project work performance is monitoring project for new work and monitoring project for the changes. And it's a bit different between adaptive projects and non-adaptive projects. Predictive projects. So in adaptive projects, there is an expectation that work will change, it will evolve and adapt. And as a result, new work can be added to the product backlog as needed, which is normal flow for the adaptive project. However, if more work is added than it is being completed, or the same amount of work is added that's being completed, the project will never end. In adaptive projects, it has to clear all the backlog eventually. So the project manager should work with product owner to manage expectations around scope management and budget implications, availability of team members and other resources. So the product owner will prioritize the project backlog on ongoing basis so that high priority tasks or items are completed first. In case of a constraint for the schedule or the budget, the product owner may consider that the project is done when only the highest priority items are delivered and the rest descoped from final goal for the adaptive type of project. In a predictive project, since the goals and schedules are more final compared to adaptive type of a project, the project team actively manages the changes to the work to ensure only the approved changes are included in the scope baseline. So any changes to the scope are then accompanied by the changes to the resources, the people, the schedule, and the budget. So there has to be a scope change decision, often if it impacts baseline and resources in a negative way, or a schedule in a negative way. Such change might be considered to be rejected for the purpose of project success. So scope changes is a major uncertainty. It should be accompanied with evaluation of a risk that's introduced, or risks that are introduced due to addition addition to a scope of a project or a change to the scope. And one way to do this is for project manager to introduce a change control board and to work with change requester to review the change requests and guide the change request through controlled change process, to approve certain changes and reject other ones, basically in attempt to reach project goal in accepted manner. And once there's information about which changes are approved and which are rejected, this should be immediately communicated to the appropriate stakeholders. Managing change, it's basically a given for any project, since project itself is a change. And there's an iterative process. You start with creating project plan. You define project baseline, which is a copy of goal estimates. You establish monitoring and tracking progress and identify what are the variances to the plan compared to the baseline. Then, based on these variances, you forecast future outcomes, determine critical path to achieving project goals based on outcomes, forecasted outcomes, and if necessary, you take corrective actions to decrease deviation from the baseline of the project and report the progress based on all those activity. And this is done iteratively, initially done during project start and done regularly, iteratively during the project lifecycle, so that you have full control over how the project performs against estimated progress towards the goals, and capture any deviations with this progress to make appropriate actions. Is this understandable concept, or do you want me to cover a bit more on this around change management?
No, it's understandable.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's understandable. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And going back to another stage of the work performance domain, project work performance domain, is learning. And I cannot state it enough. Information is the key for the existing projects, but also for future projects. So the ways to do it is through several explicit activities. First one is knowledge management. Every project is unique in a way, but there are some similarities. So information that's newly learned from the project should be captured if it helps to achieve project goals quicker, let's say, or more efficiently. And this information might be relevant for other teams, other projects. So capturing this in some sort of a organized way, some sort of a knowledge system, is the best way to ensure future projects benefit from knowledge learned during this particular project. Having, let's say, wiki type knowledge base, it's quite useful. Using this information also to train future project team members or future users is also beneficial, and can help in defining, let's say, product documentation if necessary. Another type of knowledge is explicit and tacit knowledge. Basically, project teams, they develop hands-on explicit knowledge while executing a project. And this explicit knowledge can be codified. You can capture it with words, pictures, or analytical numbers, like steps to perform certain new process is an explicit knowledge that can be documented. And this information can be then distributed using information sharing and management tools to inform other people about this information, added to documentation, manuals, registers, or even public search engines and database. Another type of knowledge is tacit knowledge, and tacit knowledge is something that you cannot codify, you cannot document. And it's usually what you call experience. So it's experiences, insights, practical knowledge, or a skill, and it's attributed usually to specific people. So any person performing a project will likely gain some additional knowledge that cannot be codified. You cannot capture in documentation and easily share with others. But still, it will benefit this particular person and future projects where this particular person will be engaged. So this tacit knowledge might be lost since projects are temporary endeavors, and having acute knowledge of what is possible to document and what is staying as experience of particular team members is crucial for the project team, project manager. And that also helps to keep value for the future projects, so that organization gains from it as a whole. So project work performance domain, as part of other performance domains, it definitely interacts with other types of activities within the project. It basically enables the work performance domain. It enables effective planning, effective delivery, and measurement, and provides communications between the project team meetings, basically effective communication between project team meeting members, between stakeholders, and impacts all of these activities in a positive way when done correctly. So, for instance, you have measurement of work performance, and you can use this information to effectively communicate state of the project to the stakeholders and collect feedback to perform adjustments if deemed useful or necessary. And it helps navigating any type of uncertainty, ambiguity, and complexity to balance out the impact of project constraints. So another activity is checking results, basically checking outcomes of the project work. First outcome is efficient and effective project performance, and this is checked through status reports that show basically efficiency of the project work. So comparison to baseline, let's say. Project processes are appropriate for the project and environment, and this is the first thing that I talked about. Basically, there must be evidence showing that project processes are compatible, they tailored to meet the needs of the project and the project environment. Process audits and quality assurance activities show that processes are relevant and used effectively. So this is type of a check to ensure efficiency of project processes. Another outcome, appropriate communication and engagement with stakeholders, and basically this means that project communications management plan and communications artifacts demonstrate without doubt that the planned communications are delivered to stakeholders with the relevant information, and ad hoc requests, as I mentioned, not exceeding certain thresholds, so that we know the information and understanding of the project execution is correctly delivered to the stakeholders, so that there are no misunderstandings or miscommunications. Efficient management of physical resources, that's what I also mentioned. Basically, the material used without waste, and rework is minimal, indicates that physical resources are used efficiently. Procurement management, similarly, as basically you check procurement efficiency through audit. So procurement audit will demonstrate that appropriate processes are utilized for the sufficient procurement, and that contractors or contractor are performing according to the plan. Effective change handling, depending on type of project. So projects using predictive approach will have a change log that will demonstrate changes that are being evaluated. It's done holistically with consideration for the scope, schedule, budget, resources, stakeholders, and risk impacts. And change log is one of the major project artifacts that is produced during the project execution. For the adaptive projects, approach would be to have a backlog that shows rate of accomplishing scope and the rate of adding new scope. Basically, whenever backlog is decreasing, it's a good sign that project is going well in terms of adaptive projects. Improved capability due to continuous learning and process improvement. This is essentially status reports. The project team status reports show fewer errors over time and show less rework or no rework, with increase in velocity of these changes. So finally, a lot of questions go around tooling for the project monitoring and control. And I can just say that there is no special tool for project monitoring and control. It's usually part of general project management tooling that I talked about previously, such as Jira, for instance. One particular common feature that's useful for monitoring and control is issue tracking, and basically ensuring that all the monitoring iterations result in certain action items that are tracked through a tracking system in terms of tasks, in terms of activity items. And these issues, they're handled through project manager for the control over the project. Just one way to do it. It's not necessarily the way to do it, but it's a common feature in project management tools, specifically to help with project monitoring and control. And having reporting capabilities for the tools helps, again, with the project health overview and adds to the project monitoring. Any questions so far?
No, for now, no questions. I was remembering project management activities done by a project manager in our company, how she was sending the lessons learned, how she's sending constant updates to all the stakeholders. But these are more of an IT project that she's running. It's more of a system upgrades and all that. In our case, I'm sending updates also, but not in a as structured way, just emails with, let's say, latest updates, or I do provide like weekly 2-3 slides with all the project's latest like pending items or achievements to the director of my department and my manager. So not to all stakeholders, like constantly sending updates. Only when there's a considerable achievement. So I'm not sure when it's required and when it's just, I mean, if it's a dynamic project that is, to quickly achieve something, there's like less work on documenting or following up or, updating.
Well, that's the fine line. It's at the discretion of project manager and depends on the project complexity and environment. And sometimes it might be just sufficient to send weekly status updates with certain measurements of the project, and it would be satisfactory for all the stakeholders. It really requires regular review. Is everything being done correctly? If project looks healthy and stakeholders look satisfied, that's basically work of project manager. And yeah, it really depends on project complexity. Sometimes you need more structure. Sometimes you need just some less formal communication. In the end, idea is to achieve specific goals, and the way it's achieved, it depends on environment.
Okay, that's good that there's no like a strong requirement on that in terms of how it must be. So possible ways to do that and recommendation.
Yeah, exactly.
But then it's not that discretion.
Yeah, and that's why it's not sort of not a framework. It's not specific methodology. It's more of a best practices in a way. And project manager with experience starts understanding when certain methods are appropriate or applicable to the project. It's basically before you start the project, you perform tailoring of the methods that you plan to use, the plans that you plan to execute, and you make adjustments during the course of project execution if necessary, and just taking cues from the environment, from stakeholders, and overall health of the project. And again, it's a matter of experience and understanding what's good for the particular project. And these just provide good signs. For instance, a lot of people are asking you for reports. It means that you're not sharing enough information. Projects frequently run over time or over budget, means there is something wrong with project performance control. So basically keeping an eye on indications and making sure that proper tailoring of the processes and ideas for the project is done beforehand. It's a step towards successful project.
Yes, I'm thinking, and I have a challenge. I'm not sure if this is within this topic.
It's fine. Go ahead.
So, for example, there is a high dependence on a specific person in team, but mostly on one single person that is a manager of a department that is not under our control, like it's a different division. So there, the director of that manager is not as supportive as required for the to this project, even though the project is priority for the company. And it's been a few months since I'm trying to push this person to work on the project activities, like the new process that we've implemented successfully in all the other countries. And now, even after many follow-ups, official communication to his director and everything, it's still not moving. Like one single country is not being, like we cannot start the process because of the high dependence on this person. And now I don't know what to do. I even escalated to my management, and they asked me to send to his manager, to his director, and I sent, but he's supporting his own manager in the delay. I don't know why the delay is not argumented well in terms of why it's happening. So I'm just thinking, how can a project manager make this push if no one supports that on the high level enough?
Yeah, it's a common situation. It's basically a stakeholder outside of a project team refusing, or for whatever reason failing to adopt the change that project is implying. And quite often, if incorrectly communicated, the executive sponsors or project managers of the project manager will not respond as expected by the project. And there could be two reasons. One is project manager is not seeing the full picture. Like maybe it's there are some constraints or some risks for implementing this particular change. We might just not have the full picture, or the urgency is not communicated properly for the sponsors of the project. So possibly changing line of communication will help here. Like I'm guessing, I cannot give really proper advice, I'm just guessing. So changing a way this situation is communicated is potential for having this successful outcome, like defining what will be impacted and when it will be impacted, in terms of if this particular change with this particular person is not done. by certain date, let's say. And here it's a bit tricky suggestion, because there are different types of people, different types of managers. Some managers respond to specific values, like if this is not done by a certain date, this is the loss that we will have, for instance. That's one way to communicate. Or other people, other managers, they're more empathic and just trying to communicate that you're failing to receive any proper feedback from person you're trying to reach, stakeholder trying to reach, and asking for help in this help. So depends on type of a manager that you're talking to, and depends on really the situation of this particular change that you want to implement. So first you need to ask yourself, do you know everything surrounding this situation? I mean, whether you understand why this is happening. And once you think you do, try to identify the best way to communicate to your manager, let's say. And for instance, if it's a logical type of a manager, try to appeal to the potential losses for the organization, and if this particular change is not implemented by a certain time. So yeah, but otherwise, project manager cannot really impact anything beyond own organization, other than trying to influence through communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I've had many situations like that. That's quite common.
Okay, because it's not common in my practice yet, have not been, but I don't have such a long practice as a project manager in terms of these activities. But so far, I've always been able to influence the departments globally that are involved in the different projects, and everything has been done. So this is my first such challenge. So I would see it's not even a risk to the department, anything. I've already discussed that, but it's just the person is not willing to learn. It's not willing to try.
Okay,
to do
not
things.
willing to learn and try, but still there is a reason why this change is being done, correct? So if this change is being done for a specific reason, that means there will be impact if this change is not implemented.
Yes.
Therefore, it should be explicitly communicated to the person that's being asked to do this, and explicitly communicated to the management, both of the person and your direct management. If this change is not implemented by this person, that will be the outcome. Like there will be some impact on organization or company as a whole. So it needs to be correctly and timely communicated.
Yes, I will then arrange a communication today to the there is a thread where I update constantly on achievements and next steps. The management of this person and my management, it's all in one thread, and the team of that person that's failing to execute. So I'll just update that this is not moving in that country, so please explain what the challenge is or something like that. So
but by the way, may I suggest, you're saying it's a thread, so it's probably email communication being done, correct?
Yes.
Maybe voice communication with this particular person would help, like to understand through human interaction. It's interactive way of discussing with the person might help in some case. Email is losing a lot of human touch and human emotions when communicating. So putting the sense of urgency through email is completely different from discussing the same through just by voice. So might be worth exploring voice communication. Not that.
Yeah, but I've spoken to this person many times already, so I'm not sure. The problem is something with this guy is not understanding. I know he's new to the company. He's been with us for a few months, and everything is new. They are a new department.
Mhm.
They acquire new processes, so maybe he's a slow learner. That just cannot that doesn't want to listen to the recordings, the trainings. He's not careful with the
It's
trainings and
possible.
all that. So
In my experience, majority of people are not malicious. They're not doing something bad just because they are bad. It's usually there is some reason connected. Either not enough time, not enough skill, not enough understanding of urgency. There could be different reasons, but it's not common that it would be ill intention, let's say.
maybe if I involve the training lead to ask her to provide a individual training to this person in another way, like to see what challenges they have, or to demonstrate on the screen, help them step by step execute the process. Would that be a solution?
Might help, especially in modern day remote environment. It's probably the best way.
All right, then I'll arrange something, because yeah, it's a very big challenge. And when we say monitoring and controlling the execution of the projects is one thing that I do for this project, like on a daily basis. I check whether there is whether cases have been updated, whether cases have been sent to where they need to be sent in order to move on with the changes. I'm seeing the reporting, so this is considered as when executing the control steps. I see that there is no movement or it's a poor execution of the project. I can undertake actions to first update the stakeholders about this failure in certain country or something, so that everyone's aware that we have been stuck in a place. And then the second thing is to undertake alternative actions to make this person or whoever is stopping or failing to move on further.
Yep, exactly. So first step is to ensure communication is handled, that everybody is aware of the situation. And second, making sure that if you did an activity and it's not working, it makes little sense trying the same approach again. So changing approaches is very reasonable in this way.
Thank you. And in the project chapter, did you say there are templates for updates or lessons learned or something like that, or these templates are more my discretion? At my discretion.
Lessons learned. It can be a lot of different type of information. So most commonly, it's just description of some idea that was discovered during the project execution, like certain activity within the project, like executing certain step cannot be done without another step being ready, and this was not known at project planning stage, let's say. Or as I mentioned, working with vendor A resulted in negative outcome, and we shouldn't consider vendor A for future projects. That's a lesson learned, basically. Also detected descriptions of the processes, new descriptions of the new processes, documentation supplying this knowledge learned during project execution. All of this is lessons learned. It's a trove of information. So the most basic lessons learned is just a table with stated facts that's discovered at a certain period of time. Usually I mark it with certain date when it was discovered, rather than not discovered, but documented, and who documented this, just for the understanding of who will have information about this.
Is it reasonable? And I know that it's more of a common sense, but maybe there is already something like that existing in the best practices. If the project, let's say, actual launch and progress has been made, let's say, a few months ago, and now it's just maintenance activities to track latest results from the process being executed. Is it reasonable to send to the project team lessons learned requests, like a feedback on what could have been done better so that we learn for the future? Or is it already like too late and better to focus on the lessons learned on the current projects?
Never too late. I mean, even if the project is passed, but it's, let's say, in the product, the result of the project is in a while being exploited, and there is some feedback to be collected, then it's definitely something that can be used when preparing for a new project. So it's, if you think you can receive some critical feedback, it's more than welcome in that case. It's a good strategy before planning a new project.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then I will then send.
This information, if collected, sorry for interrupting. This information, when collected, can go into new project charter, basically defining what we know. And if there is some feedback regarding some negative or positive aspects, it's a good idea to capture it before starting a new project in a similar environment, let's say.
Right. Okay, well, all this is very valuable to me. And yeah, to be honest, again, there's a lot of new information or something I have not been doing during my projects or after my project. So yeah, definitely have some good lessons learned today.
Yeah, and the idea for project managers to have holistic view of the work they do. So that's the thing, basically, not to be afraid to know stuff, know everything around project execution and stakeholders, basically. All right. If no further questions, that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.